Welcome to another episode of Unresolved Textual Tension. Today, Maria has decided to abandon us for the woods. She has decided to become a woods lady. She is hiking in the middle of nowhere with no cell signal and may or may not come back alive. So I'm just here with William. Hi, William.
Hey, Katie. And the thing is, Maria's handled a lot of wood before this, of many different types and grains.
So she should be okay, really.
I think she has a lot of experience and she should be all right. Unfortunately, this is a book that it's not great that Maria's missing because it has a bunch of foreign names and the plot is really long. And
okay, Look, I will help handle this. It's because I paid very close attention the whole time, knowing Maria would not be here. And I took notes on names and people and terms. So hopefully we'll be set. But yes, we are reading The Shadow of the Gods by John Gwyne, right? Gwyne, is it?
Gwyne. Yeah, this is like a Norse-inspired fantasy. They have all like I was gonna say Orf names, like Norse names, and it's like sort of there's a vague post-Ragnarok feel to things, and like it's actually a very good setting. It's very atmospheric, and in this world, in this world, the gods had their battle a la Ragnarok, not the Norse gods, but Norse-ish type animal gods, and then they all died, but they mixed some of their bloodline with humans, which ended up with tainted, who are like basically like werewolves, but for a bunch of different animal types.
I like to think of it more like they're mutants. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like,
it's more like that.
Yeah, and so some people are the tainted, which is interesting to me. It took me a hot second to realize why it's conceived as negative rather than like a good thing, and we'll get into that later. But yeah, no, they're like tainted, and they have like. Will's not wrong in saying they're like werewolves because they're like animorphs. They're like animorphs, and they kind of vaguely morph into the bloodline that they are, whether it's Ulfnir or go ahead.
Yeah, no, exactly. And like at first I thought this was very cool when I thought it was gonna be 3 or 4 animals, but then like later on you learn that they're like mutant. There's like rat people and dog people and like fox people, and you're like, okay, this is getting a little bit too much like a Naruto like.
A little bit, yes.
Classify everything in subgenres.
Yes.
Courtney says, didn't read, but I'm here curious. So you might say that you're lit curious. And you might be asking also, wait, how did you just click on a comment? Are you going into the future and bringing that comment back? Katie, could you explain this?
We are live? Is that what you're getting at?
This is a live stream. This is for our book club, which is one of our Patreon benefits. And you get to pick a book. This one was picked by our patrons through, they nominate books. I pick one and then it's a poll. And so you may see their comments pop up. I'm only mentioning this so early because my mother has been giving me so much grief about not promoting our Patreon early on. We also have a very cool Discord for a lower tier thing, and that has like, it's very cool, it's very fun, and also we would love if you could like and comment on this video. It actually does help the channel quite a lot, and if you would like to support us but don't have money, that is a little bit of we'll forgive you a little bit.
So what I'm hearing is that your mom needs to be our PR manager.
I've told her before that she should be our social media intern because she's also constantly telling me to answer comments. So for my mom, join the Patreon or like this video. Anyway, back to the book. Yes, but so this kind of takes place in a post Ragnarok. Everybody knows that the battle happened and the gods died, and not only did they intermarry some of their bloodline, but also like if you get like parts of the gods, like their bones, those are like special magic things. But mostly these tainted are viewed as like, oh, the gods destroyed the world through their their infighting hubris, so these tainted aren't good people, essentially, and so they're collared, which basically controls them, and then they get used as like mercenaries and fighters. And
tools. They get used as tools. But you know what I thought was interesting, and I like maybe if we can remember to come back to this, that would be cool. If not, whatever. But so we have these things called Vaesen, and Vaesen are basically like the lesser fae, I guess, if you want to like compare it to some other things we read. So is Will's mom adopting? Courtney says, I'm dead. But yeah, so there are these things called Vaesen. They're basically like lesser fae. So like, we've got all these little creatures of folklore myth that are like popping up. Although it doesn't particularly get explored, and I'd also like to talk with you about that. But there's some mention of it and they do pop up, but they're considered dangerous creatures that can come in and like harm you. So you have to like take measures to be wary of them and careful in your homestead. But what I'm getting at here is that the relics of the old gods, like their bones or remnants of them, actually ward away the Vaesen. And I'm assuming maybe at some point the sequel would address that, or maybe it won't ever get addressed. But I just thought that was like a weird relationship, and I'm just yeah.
Well, what I think it is that the Vaesen are like demons that got released from the underworld when
I also
this
got that vibe
big
as well.
battle happened. So they didn't like love the gods to begin with. They're not like the tainted who are the product of gods.
Yeah.
So and Vaesen, like, they're also pretty chill. There's a centipede one we meet at one point. There's a bunch of tooth fairies, but like dangerous.
Yeah.
Trolls with big testicles
Balls.
that are constantly mentioned. Which is just kind of funny, but also this is like a weirdly serious book.
I do really like, well, it's kind of like, it's funny though, it's because it's not particularly funny, but looking back on it, it's funny, especially because one scene literally has a testicle hitting somebody in the face.
It's so weird. It's like kind of, and again, the thing is, this is a very serious book, and that's the other thing I wanted to talk about.
Oh, wait a second. Somebody said, I might have missed this, but are the Vaesen from Rifa? Leek Rafa?
Rafa. I think they are. Likrafa is like this big demon.
It's a big dragon
lady,
woman lady. Yeah, woman lady.
who's like the bad one, the dark one. But the seriousness of this is something I wanted to talk about because on this channel, as you guys know, we read many girl books for girls. YA, romantasy. And in this book is not that. This book is epic fantasy. This is a man book for mans. And the thing about it is, it was really kind of cool to read this genre after having read so much YA and romantasy. And initially I was like, oh wow, like I know, books vary in quality and genre, but like it's really nice to kind of fall back into this genre that I haven't read for a while. And then by the end of the book, I was like, oh yeah, this is why epic fantasy is not always for me, because there's less of a focus on characters and character interactions, and there's more on just like the world. And honestly, my biggest problem with this book is just that it doesn't need to exist. Like nothing really happens. It like there's no real character arc. Several things that were kind of like told are going to be resolved aren't resolved. The characters don't really change. This is a 17-hour book. It's long. I found it pleasant, but by the last third I wanted something to happen, and then nothing really happened. And that's really the biggest thing. Like I enjoyed this book, and I'll probably talk about the things I did enjoy in it. I never found it unpleasant to listen to, but like this book doesn't really need, we could just skip to the second book. Like the first third of this book is the only part that I found really relevant.
My overall feeling, right, is very similar to Will's. I think the writing in this is magnificent. For the most part, I think the battle scenes are vague, but I don't really have too much of an issue with it. It does make the fighting, which there is quite a lot of, a little boring in some places. So that's unfortunate because there is so much fighting involved. But the thing is so the structure of the book is three characters, Orca, Varg, and Elvar. And we have three different perspectives, and we rotate through them as we get through the book. And Orca has a lot of agency, but again, kind of like what Will was saying, the character arc there isn't much of one so far. And I'm going to go ahead and assume right now that that's because the story pace is very slow, and the sequel will most likely contain a lot of movement in it. And I'm fine with that. But it is slow, and there's not a lot of movement on any of the characters' journeys. But I shouldn't say that. There is a lot of movement, but not a lot of things are happening. So Orca is really cool and all. I think she is definitely one of the stronger characters. We have Varg as well, who is we'll introduce later, but he's one of our other perspectives. And nothing really happens with him, and I dislike that because I like his character. I like the setup for him. I like what happens with him, but it seems kind of a little useless almost in some places. And then we have Elvar, who I just think should be cut. I don't like, I mean, I like her stuff as well. There's nothing wrong with her story as far as like there's nothing inherently like, wow, that really sucks. But Elvar's like a Disney princess, and she's basically like a like another orca and another Varg combined. And I get that all three of these, because once you get to the end of the story, like it all starts coming together. And I'm like, oh, okay, this is an interesting concept. It hit me yesterday as I was listening to it. I was like, wow, I've never really thought before about needing to have extra characters in order to explain how certain plot elements come together for maybe one or any of the characters. And obviously, this author could have gotten around that in other ways, probably, but I can see the use of it. But man, I just feel like it was so well written. It was so atmospheric. It was so visual in so many places. I like the world. I like the characters. I think they have interesting starting places. Well, not Elvar so much, but like, you know, Varg and Orca. But when it all comes together, I just felt like it lulled. I kept telling my husband, the pacing has lulled so hard after
Mm-hmm.
about the first third of the book goes through, or maybe like two fifths of the book. And then until you get to the last fifth, nothing speeds up again. And I just felt like it was a lot of horseback riding, a lot of boat going. And I didn't really have an adventure so much. So that's why, overall, I would say I actually love this book. I don't love it, but it has been such a refreshing palate cleanser of enjoyment, especially the prose. And I also really like Norse stuff, so it's that inherently made me really enjoy it. So I think it's a good book. I think people should read it, and I like it.
I think it depends on your tolerance for how much like just in the world you are. Because again, I found it pleasant, but about the first third I think is very strong, and then after that I think the book gets weaker. But
Yes.
to kind of explain about the characters, so there are three main viewpoints in this book. There's Orca, who has a dark past, but she's like a lady Viking who's now living with her husband out in a homestead with a child. And I like the way that when she was introduced, there really is a balance between like, oh, I did some bad stuff in the past, but also like I do love my child, even if I can't quite show it all the time.
And what I really liked and thought was refreshing is that one, the gender kind of like expectation of the mother being sweet and soft and the father
Mm.
being hard and stiff. And no, it's kind of reversed here where I think her husband's name's Thorkun. I'm forgetting.
Okay, well, this is another issue, which is that I couldn't remember anybody's names. Lindbergh, shout out Lindbergh, gave me a cheat sheet for what all the main characters were called, but I can't remember any of the secondary character names either.
It'll
I
be
don't know
okay.
why I had so much trouble with these like faux Viking names.
That's fine. I think I know most of them, so we should be okay. It's just the husband's name I kept losing. But yeah, so Orca is actually kind of like she's got PTSD. It's very obvious, and she has some really hard difficulty communicating emotionally and stuff like that. So I really liked this introductory scene where we get them hunting and teaching their child, and it's very much a la God of War.
I was
Yeah,
about to
right.
say,
It's
but they
very
don't
much
fight a troll at the end.
no, but it's that vibe. It's exactly that vibe, that atmosphere, and it feels so good and natural and authentic. So you have like Orca, Thorkun, or whatever his name is, if somebody wants to Thorkel, thank you. Thorkel and Brekka, her son, who is of 11 years or 10 years or something but he's young like that. Yeah.
Overall, yeah, and the thing is, there's a good sense of distance with Orca in that, like, you're kind of a little far away from her, and that mimics her emotional.
Yeah.
But the problem is that later on you'll figure out, oh no, this is just how the author writes characters. It's not really specific to Orca. But yeah, I liked her as a character. I thought she was interesting at first. Again, there's a very nice kind of balance of things, and she and her husband live on their own, but also they have a dark past, and it's also pretty quickly you figure out, or you just know that they're tainted, and they're kind of keeping on the down low. You know what I mean? A little bit in the closet, or a little bit in the hut, as they say in Scandinavia.
Well, you're given the hint that they're pretty okay with Vaesen too, which is very unique because
Yes.
no other characters are okay with Vaesen. And at their homestead, which is a little like they live in the suburbia of their Jarl's
Village.
area and everything. Jarl meaning leader of the city slash town slash homestead, not homestead, place. And on their homestead they have a small like Will said, centipede like creature that's very creepy, and they also end up adopting a weird strange tooth fairy dragon imp creature, and both of those are like just like pets. They're just like pets, and it's very cute, honestly.
I liked it. I thought it was very funny because the centipede is kind of lazy. He's that archetype of like lazy and I want food, so I'm gonna kind of like be miserly and beg for it. And again, it feels kind of like, oh, okay, this is different. Like, and also it's a nice integration of the world in that like you felt like, oh, okay, there are interesting, unique things about this world, and he's using them in an interesting way, which is gonna become one of my complaints later on that I think he could have done more with a lot of these
I
concepts.
know.
Okay, and so then that's character number one. Character number two is Varg. And Varg is a thrall, which is basically a slave.
Hmm.
And he killed some people and is now on the run, though he doesn't remember how he killed them. And he needs. So, one thing you're going to realize is his sister died. Now, could you tell me anything about his sister, Katie?
She too was a slave and was sold at the age of 6 alongside with him, and that is it.
Yeah. No, he thinks about her constantly, and yet this is a problem I have a lot in books is when somebody dies or they're grieving someone dying, they never actually remember anything about the person. Like if you go through a loss in your life, and I haven't really had anybody die in my life, but you feel like your brain is still used to thinking about them, and so you will run into these you'll be okay and you'll be okay and then you'll remember something about them and just normal and then that'll cause you pain. I've had that with friends who I've like again not lost on this mortal coil, but more friends I've lost where I've been like, oh man, I wish I could laugh with my friend here, or I wish, or like I was gonna send them a meme and then I realized we're not friends anymore. And like that's something that this book Varg will keep saying that he misses his sister, but his sister isn't a character.
Well, you know what would have been an I won't say an easy fix, but I feel like, so I when I wrote like a piece on my mom, I addressed some that idea. Like for example, when Varg uh I don't know, maybe hugs or gets close to one of the other women warriors or something. Maybe there's like a some type of soap or a smell that women use in particular, or maybe it's just the womanly like kind of thing. But like when he interacts with another woman or something, maybe he smells something and it reminds him of his sister. Maybe she too used this herb or something in her hair, and then maybe she, as a I don't know, whatever it is that women did, because we don't even know what if there are gender roles for thralls or anything like that. So maybe she would like not knit, but whatever it is that they do, loom maybe, and
Mm-hmm.
maybe she was a very good loomer or whatever the term is, loomist, and he sees her in like the pattern of one on a wall or something like that. Like that kind of stuff would really help. Also, before I hand it back over you to continue, hello Kat, hello everyone. Yes, it's very nice to see you all.
Courtney said that meme mention was so sad. Well, the thing about it is that people slot into your life and fill in certain gaps, and when or certain functions in your life, and if those people leave, all of a sudden there's no one to fill that function, and so that's part of what you miss. So like it's not like because well, I'll talk about this with Orca as well, but like her loss that she goes through should be way more impactful in how she acts and her plans and stuff like that, where it really doesn't. And in here, it just felt kind of like, okay, well, he just thinks about his sister a lot, but there's no real sense of loss to it. And so, but basically, he needs to find a blood witch lady who can like relive the last moments of a guy he killed so he can know who killed his sister. And so this is vengeance, right? And you're like, okay. And so he ends up joining pretty quickly a mercenary band called the Bloodsworn. This is actually called the Bloodsworn Saga. So theoretically, it's important, even though his viewpoint is the one that does the least and goes the least far. Like just
Yes,
nothing happens
agreed.
with it.
Yeah.
And we'll get into how he gets in there a little bit. And then the third point of view is Elvar, which apparently is a male name, and it's never explained why she has a male name, but whatever.
Maybe that would like come up later on with the family background and everything in the next book. But also, Elvar's a Disney. I really stand by this. She is
Yes,
a
no,
Disney princess, is she not?
no, she is. And the thing is, it's interesting because most of the big plot points happen in her storyline,
I
but she's by far
know.
the weakest of the three characters because the other two characters, I didn't mention this, but Varg I actually identified with pretty quickly. You know, he's down on
Yeah.
his luck. He misses his sister. He's also fairly competent and intelligent, and so there's like and so like there's a good sense of like, okay, I'm on the side of this character. She is just like initially I thought it was gonna be interesting because I thought she was gonna be like, and she kind of is, but like, oh, are we the baddies? Like initially there is a kind of silence to how she thinks that I actually thought she was a viewpoint that was going to die really early, and then that ended up not being the case. But like I thought like, oh, okay, there's
What
something
made you
going
think
on here.
what made you think she was gonna die? I'm just curious.
There's a certain lack of interiority to her or a distance
Yes,
emotion that I
there
was like,
is.
oh, okay, they're going to come in, she's going to try to kill somebody, and then that's how we're going to get to another main character or something like that. I don't love where her backstory goes. Like Katie said, it's a very Disney princess. I thought there were more interesting things that could have been done with her.
The thing is, there are a lot of interesting aspects to Elvar, but she herself is not interesting. That's the problem. Elvar is like very likable because she doesn't really she's just loyal. She does the things you expect her to do, or that you would want her to do. She plays into it, which in and of itself is not a bad thing. But like she comes from like a part of the world that's very unique. Like there is not another part of the world that we really explore that's like where she comes from, which we'll get into later on. And also some of the stuff that she like grew up with and what she has access to is also incredibly unique. So I like her viewpoint and what it like the world, the part of the world that it gives you, but I don't really particularly care about her story.
Yeah, I think that's very true. Chris M says Varg was the only one with a hook at the beginning. It took me
Yeah.
35% to be interested in Orca and Elvar. I didn't care about it all beyond just seeing what happens with the dragon. So yeah, I will say one of the things I thought was really good is how quickly the book hooks you with Varg. And I actually even found Orca's kind of plot line to be interesting at the beginning because I was like, okay, we're going to build to something and we're building character
Yes.
and I'm willing to wait for it.
Yes,
And then
me
I
too.
don't feel like that's paid off particularly well. But the thing with Elvar is that she just doesn't, there's nothing really distinctive about her and we'll not really find anything distinctive about her until halfway through. And even then it's, you know, she ends up being, just to cut to the chase a little bit. She ends up being, you know, a runaway princess who didn't want to get married to some like fat man. Blah 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 blah. I want to live
She did
life
not
and
want to be plowed like a field only to give brats to some strange fat old lordling.
yeah, exactly. Like she's that character, and it
Yeah.
should be said that each of the three characters are actually pretty archetypal. Elvar is this princess who, you know, doesn't want to be tied down, wants to go a Viking, and Orca is the mom, the the badass who someone crossed and now is on a rip roaring rampage of revenge slash mama bear.
See, this is where I have a problem though, is that or maybe not a problem, but I didn't think it added. I don't think it was a benefit. There we go. That's the better way of phrasing it. Orca's vengeance. Varg is vengeance. But then it gets wishy-washed in the middle, right? It's because he can't initially pursue his vengeance. He must first do other side quests in order to get the tool through which he can then pursue his vengeance. And then we get Elvar, adventure? Just
Yeah,
adventure.
I was like, oh, okay, this is gonna be three different takes on revenge, and then it's two takes on revenge that don't go anywhere, and then some Disney princess. And then Varg also, again, to going back to the archetypal idea, is like very much like the ex-slave who becomes part of the boys kind of band. And the thing is, I think it works well with Orca and Varg, and I don't think it does with Elvar. Varg and Orca both have a little bit more going on under the surface, though again, I would argue that as time goes on, their plot lines get weaker. Um, but Elvar especially is just like there's nothing more with her plot line. Like we'll talk more about how I think that could have been subverted more as we go. But and it is a little bit in the book, but it's not a lot. And so that's our three. Oh, and she's part of a mercenary band who basically hunt down Tainted, and then they're slavers essentially, and they bring them back to sell them.
Yes, and just to clarify, just in case we reference them, because I probably will, um, uh, Elvar is part. So this is also something that I think weakens the identity between the characters, I guess. So Elvar is part of a mercenary group called the Battle Grim, who is run by Agnar, and Vard becomes part of a mercenary group called the Bloodsworn. And the thing is between the Battlegrim and the Bloodsworn, it's not like inherently a bad thing or anything that they're similar and everything, but it does make it feel like it's overlapping too much, I guess. You know? Feels
Yeah, that's
repetitive.
why that's part of the reason I thought she was going to die at the beginning, because I was like, this is like we have two different battle groups, but yeah, it feels like that. Yeah, you're overlapping a little bit there, and then also you got okay. Also, just spoiler alert: none of these characters meet until the very end of the novel, and they don't even actually interact. I mean, in the last scene, Varg sees from afar Orca, and that's it. That's the only way they connect. That's one of the real problems, that this is like a 17-hour prequel. Like, it's just
Mm.
17-hour prequel is actually a good, or prologue. 17-hour prologue is a good title for this. God, I'm brilliant.
Oh my God.
But
Oh, go ahead.
but that's kind of the problem, is that like they don't interact, and again, thematically they don't really connect to each other, and plot wise they don't. It's not like something that happens in one person's storyline affects the others. There's just three people. One of
It's
the things
building
I
up
think
to it.
again though, it's a prologue.
I don't inherently find that an issue though. Like, is it exciting? No. No, it's not. But like that doesn't make it bad for me, you know?
I disagree.
Fair enough. Continue.
So yeah, no, archetypally, I think Orca and Varg work better until, again, I think in the first third they work pretty well, but I just don't think or Elvar is that interesting, because we've seen this character so many times, and there's nothing being really done differently with it. Um, uh, yeah, so that's basically kind of the overall idea of who the stories are and where they start. And then we can jump into the plot if you want, or if you have anything more to say about them.
No, we can jump in. Okay, so we start off like we were saying before with Orca's side, and Orca hunting, as we said, with her husband Thorkel and her son Brekka. And as they're hunting, they hear a strange noise. And they go to pursue to look for it. And so they're going through the woods. It's winter, of course, you know, Vikings. And they come upon a homestead of people that they do know. And this homestead is owned by a couple and a young boy, not unlike their homestead themselves. And they find that the husband has been killed by sword blade, and they find the wife, if I remember correctly, gutted, which is horrible. If I feel like if I'm correct me if I'm misremembering, but I'm pretty sure I remember her being like stabbed into the gate of their homestead with her guts hanging out.
I don't remember, but it was pretty gruesome.
Yeah, and then the boy is missing. So this is the beginning of a very, very, very big plot point. And it is a missing child with murdered parents. And they think perhaps it might be Vaesen that have come upon. But we have the evidence of man-made weapons creating the wounds on the two people. So Orca and her family drag the corpses into the local township, and there they try to, you know, bring to the attention of everyone. Specifically, can somebody remind me the name of the sniveling dude with the snot on the end of his nose all the time? It starts with a G. But so there's like this sniveling, like, you know, typical, like annoying.
Yeah, I didn't like that. It's just such a stock character for a world that otherwise feels like it might have more nuance. And he's all like, well, I guess we'll find the children. And then obviously he can't find them. One thing I will say, and because I think this happens here, is that this book has a really bad problem at the beginning where you can't remember the names, and then it'll offset characters in a way that you think one character is continuing. So like after this scene of the murdered homestead, and they're like, wait, where is the child? It then cuts to Varg's first chapter where he's on the run from having killed somebody. And so my brain immediately made the connection of like, oh, he killed the people and now this is his story. But it isn't.
Oh, yeah. No. You just like you unearthed a memory. That I also thought that too when I was listening to it the first time. I was like, oh, this is the murderer. And then no, it has nothing to do with
There's
that.
also a part where, we have Elvar's first chapter, where she like kills some people with a troll in this Bloodsworn gang. And then next chapter, Orca wakes up being like, oh man, all my old memories. And I'm like, wait, so was that a flashback of her? Because again, at the time, I couldn't really remember names well. This happens twice, and I think maybe he's trying to be thematic about it, but like, it's actually just kind of confusing. Gudvar?
Yeah, Gudvar.
Gudvar.
Yeah, that's the sniveling guy's name with the snot. It's always snot at the end of his nose, which really like it's a
It's
little
ableist. It's ableist. Let's be
shut
real.
up.
Some people like
And
have
snot at
trouble
the end
with
of
their sinuses.
the thing about Gudvar though is that he's kind of like look, there are more interesting sniveling characters than this, and he really doesn't serve too much of a purpose. I mean, he does, I guess. We'll get to it. Okay, fine. Let's move on past this guy because he doesn't really matter. So
Hold
yeah,
on. Ms. Ali Snow says even Vikings have allergies. Yes. I think it's one of these things where it's like, oh, he's ugly on the outside, so he must be ugly on the inside.
yeah, that is a little like annoying, but whatever.
It's just kind of like, okay, whatever.
It's ham-fisted. It's ham-fisted is what I wanted to say. It's a little
Yes.
hammy.
The next thing, because we'll just go through through orcas a little bit.
Yeah.
There is, because it explains the political situation. Basically, there's a lot of different like chiefs going around. Jarls who control like, which is spelled with a J, which is
Yes.
dumb, but whatever. So the Jarls, like, they're kind of spread out, but they've been slowly kind of concentrating under this one queen called Sigrun. Yes, it is Sigrun. Sigrun. That's one of the things about this world is that it's like very gender neutral who gets to be a warrior or not, which like I found fine. I thought it was pretty good. I didn't.
It seems
notice
natural.
Yeah, it feels pretty natural. So the Jarl, who is also a woman of Elvar's town, comes back from meeting with her. So she comes back from having met with Sigrun and is like, hey guys, we're going to have to be under her rule because, you know, otherwise we're going to have to be under the other people's rule. And the rabble is like, rabble, 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 rabble. And I actually really liked this moment because you see this big political movement from the viewpoint of the homesteaders, of the small people, of the farmers, and that what is their... What does any of this mean to them? What are their material goals and objectives, essentially, right? And like usually you're so often used to seeing this from the elite perspective of like, oh, we're trying to build like, you know, an alliance. Sorry guys, I can't talk today. This is just one of those times. Like I was recently reading, and Katie, close your ears because I'm saying it.
I don't have
A Song of Ice
liquor.
and Fire. I wasn't reading it. I was reading a commentary on it, talking about how the Night's Watch in that, which is a military organization, makes no sense. And a couple of other people pointed out, like, well, how else would you control this area? And because he's a historian, he's a military historian who was writing this, who I read a bunch. And he was like, well, okay, the thing is, you're looking at this from an elitist perspective of how do I fix this political problem? You're not looking at this from the perspective of the soldier of why should I go and not have a wife or lands and die in the cold? And I love that we were getting this scene from the perspective of why would we want to join this lady and pay taxes? Like, what are we going to get out of this? It's not really borne out through the rest of the novel. The rest of the novel will just be very action adventure-ish, but I really like for a moment here that we're getting this from a different perspective, and it makes the world feel more real. And like
It
people are
does.
doing things outside of the main characters.
It does. And I really like I said, the world is really rich, honestly. Can we just like focus on Orca for a second as well? Because that's a little easier to say.
Well, the thing is, none of them will ever connect, so we can just go through them that way. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So let's start. Let's just start with Orca then, in the order that it's introduced. So, you know, after Orca brings the corpses and announces this, Guthvar is like, it very much seems like he's in on it, even though I'm pretty sure he's like, that never comes to fruition because the way his disinterest in the murder comes across and the way he's kind of like, oh yeah, we'll like look into it. Like, it's like, no, you're not going to look into it. You don't care. So it's a little, you know, mixy. It could be either that he's uncaring because there are other things going on, or it could be that he's trying to keep it on low, like, the DL, you know? So anyway, he's there taking care of things while Sigrun, the Jarl Sigrun is out, you know, meeting and dining with Queen, was it Helkar?
Helka, it sounds like.
Helka, who is like the big, super queen. Like,
Yeah, the person who I
mega
said was
queen.
Sigrun is actually Helka. So just bear that in mind.
Yes. So Sigrun is the Jarl, one of many. Think of it like mayors, I guess, or earls, I guess you could think, like somebody said before. You've got a whole bunch of that. And then Helka is the major queen, right? And so, oh, yeah, major queen, minor queen, I guess you
High
can kind of
queen.
think of it. Yeah, high queen, there you go. So, yeah, Sigrun's on her way back from treating with her. And when they get called for speaking about how the meeting went, Orca Thorkun and her son Brekka all go to the meeting, and they're on a small fishing ship with another local, another homesteader. Well, not homesteader. He is a fisherman, and what's kind of cool is that everybody has a warrior. Like, well, not everybody, but a lot of people have warrior backstories. So it
Mm.
really much does feel like everyone has had to fight at some point in their life, and very few have not had to, or at least in this part of this world. Which makes sense. It's because this place is called like the battle plane. It is called,
I did like that. Yeah. Their area is called the battle plane of like where the gods fought. I thought that was a nice
yeah,
little world building thing.
yeah. I think the name they call it is like Vigrid or something like that. So anyway, they're on the ship, and the reason I'm mentioning this because really felt like this helped build the world too, even how small and subtle it was. They're on this fishing ship. They're talking about the meeting and how they feel about it and stuff. And we're introduced that this fisherman has two sons, Leaf and what was the other kid's name?
Holder or
It's an
something
M.
like that.
It's an M. Anyway, somebody can throw it in the
Oh
chat if you
yeah,
can remember.
Mulder or something like that. I always
Yeah.
remember because I was like, that sounds like a weird name.
So they're introduced here, which will matter. And so they all go to the meeting. And as Will said, a lot of the homesteaders are like, what does this have to do with us? We have like, you go do your petty ruler squabbles. We, meanwhile, are trying to, Mord, his name is Mord, thank you. I might have to ask that again. Actually, let me just write that down now. So Mord, so anyway, yeah, so they go to the meeting, and this is a very important event because the fisherman guy is like, bruh, I really hate you, Guthvar. Come here. Let me just poke you with my fucking axe. And so thus we must have now a duel of sorts, their version of a duel. It's
The
because
Holmganger.
yes, and 'cause he has thrown down his glove.
And he goes to Elvar and he's like, "Will you be my second?" And she's like, "Your son should be." And he's like, "But I sense in you a dark." You know what I mean? Like they're idiots. Like I don't want them to die. Just make sure I get buried, okay? And she's like, "Okay, I guess I will, even though I shouldn't." Ooh, dark past.
I know, but I
I
really
don't want
like
that part
that.
of me to come out.
Well, no, she doesn't really say it. She does not care about the dark part coming out in this moment. She's just kind of like, wow, this is annoying. That's her vibe. She's like, this is so much more.
she's she's very grumpy lady, and I really actually like that about her character.
She just seems practical. She seems very practical. She just wants to get on with her life. And so it's very refreshing. It's because she is also, as a side note, she is one of the few characters of the three, right? What I should say, not one of the few. She is the most active in her choice making, and she propels her plot forward, whereas the other two are very reactionary to what is happening.
Yeah.
And that stands out a lot and makes her a very refreshing part of the story. But anyway, they have this duel, and as they're fighting, the sniveling guy with the snot and fisherman guy are obviously, you know who's gonna win. It's the fisherman guy. He's like really good in comparison to the sniveling nothing character. And so as he, defeats him, it's to first blood. They're not supposed to do anything more than that. Actually, it was not till first blood. It was either till surrender, first blood, or death. And they're like, surrender. And so anyway, he surrenders, and Mrs. Sigrun, Jarl Sigrun has something called a thrall, and it is a
It's basically it's a hot, dangerous wolf girl who like is under her control, and basically the Sigrun said, "Hey, stop him!" And the wolf girl then just straight up killed the fisherman, like murdered him real brutal, even though he was gonna break the rules and kill the snot guy, but like, and so his sons are really pissed. Everybody's really pissed. Sigrun is like, "Oh, I didn't tell you to do that," and wolf girl like.
Ulfednar.
She and Elvar fight a little bit, and Thorkel, Elvar's husband, comes in and to stop her. I always just imagined him kind of just picking her up, putting her on his shoulder. But she cuts him, and then after she cuts him, she does a licking the blood off the blade thing. That's like gross, but also hot. Orca, not Elvar. Oh yeah, no, that's true. And then
Yes.
Chris M says it was Ulfhednar.
Oh, Ben makes a good point too. Yeah, I also thought this as well. Ben says I would have kind of liked it if Guthvar were actually a good fighter. His being an asshole to Orca is enough of a reason to hate him. Not everything about him has to suck. Fully agree. Again, it's kind of hand-fisted the way his character has been written, and it's. I mean, not that it like takes away from the story, but it definitely doesn't add to it.
Yeah, it doesn't give you a sense of authenticity. And so Elvar goes home. Not Elvar. Orca goes home with Thorkel, and once they're home, she's like, "Oh, we should get out of here. I think she tasted your blood." And he's like, "Okay, we'll do it tomorrow." And like this whole time too, there's like this push and pull between like, "Oh, should we teach our son to be tough or like let him be a child a little bit?" And Orca's like, "No, he needs to be tough." And Thorkel's like, "Let him have a childhood."
I really so let me take a sidestep to the side of this telling. I really thought that was going to be the core thing of their story in the beginning. Like, obviously a major, bigger plot, but I thought one of the subplots was going to be a parenting back and forth between whether or not, or honestly, that is not what I thought. I thought that, but I thought that just with Orca, it's because it was incredibly obvious almost from the get-go that Thorkun was gonna die, because he was written so well, and it's like he's like the best dude ever. He's big, he's brawny, he's like a bear, but he's sweet, and he loves his son, and he's honorable, and he's super cool, and she loves him. And it's like, oh, okay. I wrote into our Discord, I was like, like 30 minutes into Orca's storyline, I was like, oh, so her husband's gonna die. And I was like, that sucks, because he was a cool character. But I get it, and I'm fine with that. So, spoiler, by the way. We already said that earlier, but
yeah, he's gonna die. So basically, the next scene is like they bang or whatever. You don't get to see it on page, which is disappointing.
Shut up! It is actually very well written. This is like this.
I did think they were cute.
Yes, they are very cute, and it's really sweet because again, you know, they go home, we get what's nice, and I think is such a great touch, and I feel like we talk a lot about how authors don't do this in their story, is to like establish what the mode of their life is beforehand so you can feel the loss of it. And so we do get like the hunting scene, which already like you know, shows that that's like they're hunters, they trade in pelts and stuff and also have a homestead. So there's that. Then we get them in the political sphere of their local town, and then we get their home where we have like them have a dinner together. We have their son whittling. We have the centipede old man face creature come on out of his water hole, and they feed him. Orca is the one that like made a deal with him, and so it's her spit and blood that goes into a bowl of oatmeal for him. And then we have the little tooth fairy creature, which I'm forgetting the name of, and she has been adopted by Brekka. And we get the sense that Brekka is kind of a bleeding heart for these creatures and has like a special connection. Maybe it's because how easy he gets along and how empathetic he is towards them. And so we get all of that life in them. And so when Orca the next day goes to the local tree spirit who basically they made a deal with to say, hey, can you protect us in your forest? And she was like, yeah, bet. She goes to go ask that woodland spirit, hey, so do you know of any of your sisters and where there are other safe forests to dwell in? And finds the tree spirit massacred. The tree has been cut down by axes. It is scorched. There has been a battle of some sort. Yes.
I don't know if you caught this, but it was really clever on the part of the author. But this is the crossover to God of War. That's the tree he cuts at the beginning of his game. Just kidding, that's not what it is. Miss Ice Nose says, I'd argue that Orca's setup went on way too long. I was okay with it. This is sort of a slightly sedentary book in that it's moving kind of slowly, but I was like, okay, there's enough stuff going on that's interesting. I also know something is going to happen, so like I'm okay with it. More than anything, I had problems in this book where nothing is happening than the parts where it's like, okay, you kind of know something's going to go on. And again, like Katie said, I really actually liked that we got a sense for what her family was like and what her stakes were, and so then when the death of Thorkel and her son comes, like you're like,
hits.
Oh, I'm with you. Yeah, it's not like the most emotional thing ever, but you're like, okay, I get it, I'm with you, let's do this. And that's what happens. She runs back and she finds that while she was out cavorting. Their homestead got broken into, and now there's a bunch of dead people everywhere. And Thorkel was inside, and he's like, "They took our son." And she's like, "Who?" And he's like, "The Dragonborn." And because Dragonborn are like tainted, who have been tainted by the dragon, but like they don't really exist.
Leaf Lika or whatever. Yeah, no, they're not supposed to actually exist. And I think if I understand correctly, that's supposed to. I don't know why they're not supposed to exist. I think I missed that part, but it might be because Leek, and forgive my pronunciation, but Leek Lifa or whatever, the dragon, one,
Not forgiven. Cultural appropriation.
she was imprisoned. The whole thing is that she was some. I don't. What's the right word? No, because I wanted to say dictator. That's not the right word. She's a really big, impressive negative force. And so she was imprisoned beneath the earth and tricked into her imprisonment. And I don't know if it's because she was imprisoned that there's not supposed to be any tainted of her blood or something else. But the point being is that there are not supposed to be any dragonborn. What did Miss Sally Snow say? Every time somebody says in a fantasy novel, but blank doesn't exist, it's just a tale. I know, right? And there's all this other crazy shit going on. Yeah, you're right. But also Miss Sally Snow said cutting out the fisherman and sun stuff would have helped pick up the pace. I agree. I don't think Leaf and Maud or whatever should have came up later.
Well, okay, so we'll talk about it. Basically, so she's like, okay, she takes his blood and she does the like dramatic Force Awakens, like, oh, across her face. Except here it's actually kind of cool because she's like, I'm gonna be a badass. And she goes and hunts down the people, and they've got into a ship, and she like straight up murders a couple of them and is like, hey, where are you going? This book does the thing I don't like where torture is effective. And I just don't like that as a trope.
I knew you were gonna say that. As soon as she started, okay, no, later on, she tortures another person where she cuts off their toes and stuff. And I'm like, Will's gonna say this is the book that does the thing.
I don't like it. It doesn't work in real life. I don't understand why these people don't just lie to her. Like, there's no way for her to know that they're lying to her in the time frame of, like, I get kind of maybe like, okay, I'm gonna kill you or do this thing, but like actual torture, people just tend to say like whatever.
Also, Zira makes a good point, and I also thought this as well. I wanted to bring this up, and I don't want to forget. I really wish Thorkel had lived longer. Like, maybe he had been I don't know. I don't care what the situation was that leads to him not dying, but it would have been nice if they actually went together and forget Mord and Leaf. Instead, it's her and because I don't like the pseudo son thing that goes on later on that we'll talk about, or pseudo like sons. So if Thorkel and Orca had gone on to this, we would have been able to really enjoy kind of maybe their power couple thing, because like they're both.
The thing about it is it's an interesting relationship that doesn't get explored a lot in fiction, of like being a married couple. What does that mean? Maybe the things that work for them in peacetime are now causing strain because Thorkel was always kind of holding her back a little bit. And she's like, no, we got to find our son. You don't care about our son. And maybe he's like,
yes,
no, you don't. Like something like that would have been really interesting. I even would have liked something of like maybe. Well, no, that would have been too complicated. But something like that would have been cool. Instead, what's going to happen is, okay, so she kills the people at the beach, but they're like, oh, we're not going to tell you anything. They went off. So to get more information, she goes back, but they give her like a clue. So she goes back to the village and finds that the two fishermen's sons tried to murder the guy and failed. And now they're tied up. So she like unties them and says, go to a ship, go to a boat, and I'll help you get out of here.
No, I have to go into detail just a little bit here. You have to understand, Orca's John Wicking things, and it's like really intense. I like it. I'm not saying I don't like it. So she sees the two brothers, strapped up against a pole, and she speaks with them, and they're like, yeah, we tried to blah blah blah. And there's a guard who was asleep on the job, and she just goes up to them and like guts them. And then, or like through the throat or something. It's very vicious. And then she very smartly, which is very refreshing as well, leans the body up against the thing so it looks like they're still sleeping, which is just a small move, but it feels so real. And then she releases the two sons, and then she's like, go get your boat, wait for me. If I'm not here by sunrise or whatever, then go off without me. And then, Will, please, you may continue from here.
And so then she goes into the place where Sigrun is sleeping, and she, like, again, John Wicks everybody, and there's, like, the hot wolf girl. I don't know if she's hot or not. She was hot in my head. And she's like, yeah, I told somebody I was supposed to tell people who found tainted children, so I did. And here's what I thought was going to kind of happen, and I'm very disappointed it didn't. I thought that she was gonna go on an adventure, like she was gonna take the wolf girl with her as like her, like, oh, I got the power of your collar, now you have to do what I say, kind of a thing. And I would have liked that so much more than the companions she gets, because grumpy lady with like kind of outgoing savage wolf girl would have been like, it would have been a really funny pairing to have in terms of their contrasting personalities, and also it would have been a little bit gay, and I'm here for it.
William,
I'm here.
William!
That would have been so much fun in her grief. You know what I mean?
Ignore William. But I do like this idea. It's because it would make sense, I think, if I understand correctly, because she would have been able to track her son. So why wouldn't she have taken the thrall collar? Because she's a thrall.
I actually don't know how the thrall thing works. But like, you could also just change the rules of the world so that it works that way. It's good. It would have been good stuff.
Of course. No, I'll tell you how it worked. Well, I'll tell you how it could have worked. So the thrall collar, the whole thing, right, is that the tainted are able to be enslaved by this. It's because the chain used to ensnare Liklifa, or something similar to it, or something to that effect, it has special properties, and so it has been passed out so that way the tainted can be restricted by words of power. And so I think it's by word, if I remember correctly. So simple. Have her go up to Sigrun, because she already, Sigrun's in bed with her lover, and so she kills the lover, which is great. I feel so bad for that. The lover never gets a name. It's just the lover. And she fights off Wolf Girl, and she's still kind of alive, and she slashes Sigrun's face open, and as she's freaking out over that, she ends up killing Wolf Girl. But why not just go to Sigrun and be like, what are the words of power, or something like that? I don't know. Because surely, in this world, since torture works...
Or even be like to Sigrun, like, you tell the wolf girl to do what I want, and I'll let you live. Like, that would have been, I think, very cool. By the way, so I mentioned gayness at one point, and Valerie immediately showed up. Hey, nerds. Hey, and she said, why is Will getting yelled at? Because Katie is homophobic. Let's be real. That's what's actually happening. She doesn't want there to be a gay love interest. I would have thought that would be really cool. But anyway, the problem is that the companions of Orca on this quest are going to be the two boys, and they are the most boring boys ever. There's not even like a... I think the book is kind of... But I don't even think so. You would expect the boys to be like a surrogate son kind of situation that she bonds with, but she doesn't really. All she does throughout the trip is basically like teach them how to fight, and then they help her out at one point. I think Wolf Girl would have been way more interesting. I actually think even Wolf Girl with the boys would have been more interesting. I think that would have been like a cool little revenge party.
Yes, that would have been fascinating. Okay, wait. I want to explore that with you for a second. But yes, thank you very much. I want to clarify who said it. Chrysanthemum Knight. The metal is from a chain from a wolf god that was sealed away. And yes, the incantation. So yes, it wasn't Liklufa. It was I knew I was getting that wrong. But anyway, no, that would have made so much more sense. It's because Wolf Girl killed their father. So to have grabbed her and used her as a tool, and then in order to find her son, and having to deal with the boys wanting to kill her, and that whole thing, that would have been
you're right.
Fascinating.
That would have been so interesting. She could have been like, look, I'll help you kill her after this mission is done. And the wolf girl would have been like, if you can try. And like, there's a lot of tension in there. Yeah, you're right. That would have actually been so much more interesting. But no, we just get boring straight boys who are like, hey, we suck at fighting. And again, there's no... The thing about it, I think, is that theoretically there is a theme behind Orca's journey of like... Or you would think there is a theme of like, oh, she cannot become hard and cold because of this vengeance. She needs to kind of hold on to the humanity that her family gave her. And at the end, she decides to save these ravens, which gets her into trouble, but then they help her out. But it's like, it's too immediate. We'll get to it there, why it doesn't work. But like, and you would think the boys would be a reflection of that, but they really aren't. I mean, there's a problem here where nothing... Because after this point, her and the boys are on the river, and then they have to kill like... an ugly siren chick, and then they go to a town and kill some more people, and then the boys
excuse
save
you,
her.
It was not a siren chick, it was a siren man, first of all, if I remember correctly. Also,
well, that's true. He, him pronouns. Yes. No. Hope to Dust says, "What will?" Katie is the slash queen.
I am.
Katie with pretty much every book we could read could be gayer. Well, she should keep up that energy for now.
Whatever. No, there is no gay story to be had. There's too much. Oh wait. But you know what's interesting? How you couldn't do Thorkel Lives and that.
Yes, you could have.
Could
that
you?
would have been That would have been great. It could have been like, yeah, because then even they could have disagreed on the use of her. Thorkel could have been like, we should not be using a tainted. We ourselves are the, like, what are you doing? And she's like, it's a tool for vengeance.
Oh my god, you're so right. Oh my god, that would make so. And then they don't actually discuss it like verbatim because the boys are there and everything. And so they're not like, we're tainted. You can't like enthrall this tainted. She's just like us. And that could have. Oh my god.
And then, of course, there could have been a threesome. Like, that's the natural, that's the next logical step. You know what I mean?
I think you just killed a part of me just now.
But think about how dirty wrong it could be of the two of them having sex after her husband died. And
Jesus
it's the grief.
Christ,
And
you're
she
so
realizes that Wolf Girl isn't like her husband. And also maybe like, you know, she could get ears and a tail. That could also be something that like
All right,
happens.
so we've all learned from this episode of Unresolved Textual Tension that Will is a furry.
I'm not a furry, but I'm advocating for their rights in books and representation.
Moving along.
But basically, that's what happens. They have to like find some clues, and they find that basically there's some slavers stealing kids, and Orca goes John Wick, and the boys are like, okay, well, we can't get our revenge now because you're right. We shouldn't just charge back in. So why don't we go with you for a little bit, and you teach us to fight? And she's like, okay, bet. But like,
yes, but yes.
but like,
I do want to mention though what's really cool and what is unique to Orca, and I really wish it was kind of more explored because I really love. I mean, I'm also partial to the folkloric aspect of like, for example, what small rituals or what small symbols do you make in order to make deals or to ward things off and things like that, right? I really like those steps. It's almost like a dance and it's really pretty. And so when the siren-esque creature comes along and the boys are enthralled, she knows that what's going on. She knows the name of the creature, and she knows that you must speak words of some sort while dealing a killing blow in order to kill the creature. Otherwise, its skin cannot be sliced. And she knows that it doesn't like iron. And so all these little rules and stuff, you're like, oh, okay, she knows about this part of the world that other people, in fact, most other the people that we look at or read about don't know. And so it makes her really unique and fun. But again, that's not like, I don't know, it kind of falls flat.
So the problem is that there's a thing where in fiction, everything that happens and takes up page space needs to serve like triple duty. It needs to both move the plot forward, tell you something about the world, or tell you something about the characters. And there's a problem here where like the siren is a good example of this. This tells you something about the world. There are these siren people, and it kind of adds a little bit of action, but it doesn't tell you anything from a character perspective about her. It doesn't move forward her story arc. It's not like an interesting choice of like, oh, I'm going to give up my vengeance to save the boys type of a thing, or even like, you know, I'm having to kill this thing that I otherwise would have really liked, but I'm so cold and hard now, I don't care. Like, it's not doing any of the things from a character perspective, and that's the big problem with the middle chunk and last chunk of this book is there is action and one plot point leads to another, but it doesn't tell you anything radically new about the world. That's one of the problems. This world is pretty easily explored within the first third. And it also doesn't move. Orca just doesn't have an arc. She basically starts the story happy. There's the status quo of like, okay, my family's dead. Now I'm on my rip-roaring rampage of revenge. And then by the end of the story, she's still on her rip-roaring rampage of revenge and still has not found her kid. It's not like she even was trying not to be violent for a little bit and then at the end was finally like, no, I can't. I have to embrace who I used to be. The old Orca who was an orca whale. That's what she should have been. That should have been her tainted, was an orca whale.
Okay, so no. Also, it could have been a lot of other things. Like, so for example, let's say we do keep everything the same and it's the two boys. Oh, okay, well, maybe she's really harsh on them. And then she realizes, because one of the things that Thorkund keeps telling her that we said before is that you must be softer. They're only children. You know, the whole reason we fought so hard and did what we did was so that way they could live a softer life. And so what's the point of making them hardened if they can't live that soft life we fought for? And so similarly, she could have had that issue with the boys, I suppose. I think that's boring personally, but like that could have happened. But yeah, no, I think that there's not, that's one of the things I wrote down actually. I wrote, there's not enough weight to each of the minor enemy fights that she has. Like for example, when the siren creature is fought, I feel like it didn't need to be any longer than that, but maybe there could have been more meat to that. And then when they get to a major city, it's the city that Queen Helka, like it's like the capital, and there's like the giant bones of a great eagle god there that could protect everyone from Vaesen for like leagues, and so it's like a really big hub. And we also get in Elvar's part of the story that spoilers, her father is also the Jarl of a place where it's a giant snake's head. And so it's kind of interesting that they use like the bones and the corpses of these gods to protect themselves against the Vaesen. And that's kind of a cool concept. But anyway, they get to the city and she's like, all right, peace, boys. You're on your way. Find a life. Here's some money. I'm going to go do, John Wick. And so Snakavik. Yes, you're right. Chrysanthemum Knight was talking about the snake bones. And so anyway, so she goes from pub to pub or whatever, tavern to tavern, and she's trying to gather gossip / anything she can in order to find clues, and she does inevitably.
The thing is, for me, is like none of this matters.
It's quite dry. It's quick. What's nice is that it is unfortunate that more things do not happen, because the lulls could be quickly paced, because like many things happen, but too many things happen with nothing happening. And so that's the problem, I guess. But anyway, she hunts someone down who has some information, and she ends up following them into another tavern, and there she has a great big badass fight where she truly does John Wick people. It's like 12 people, and she kills 6 of them single-handedly, and she finds the guy that probably stole her son, and his name is Drekker.
Again, I do not remember. Fight scenes became hard in this book because I could not remember anybody's name except for the main characters and Grendel. And his name isn't even Grendel. I think it's Gwen.
Gren, yes. Anyway, so she has a really big badass fight. They are like, "Oh, you're the woman. Haha, your husband squealed like a pig when I killed him." Whatever. And so anyway, they have a fight, but then as she's surrounded and Queen Helka's people are coming, she's like, "I will die this way, and I will never rescue my son. Oh no!" And then Leaf and Mord come by on horseback.
So the 2 boys come in, they save her, and she's like, "Oh, you didn't have to save me." And they're like, "Well, we're cool." And she's like, again, you would think this would be like a bonding moment. Like,
it's not.
So if you go back to what we were talking about in terms of if her husband had been there and the hot wolf girl had been there, then there could have been a lot of tension within the party of what decisions to make and what not to do.
Yeah.
And there's conflict there. And you could tell a story about who she has become in her grief, or, like all that stuff could have happened, and it doesn't. And so all these encounters are just like A to B to C.
Wait a second. Something just occurred to me. Why didn't let me make sure I'm reading this right. Give me 1 second. It is Vard the Bloodsworn. Why doesn't she go to the Bloodsworn to ask for help tracking these people down? Because guys, spoiler, I'm pretty sure so there's this whole time there is this
I think the reason is that she didn't know where they are, and she needed to follow her kid pretty quickly.
I guess, but I feel like she could have like somehow sent word or something though. But no, there's this like little piece of like gossip going around that a member of the old leader of the Bloodsworn was called Skullbreaker or something like that, Skull Smasher, and they're like, "Oh yeah, we heard that person died in a fight on one of the boats, and during the fight with this big creature or whatever, they fell into the water and drowned due to the heaviness of their mail." And surprise, she is Skullbreaker, which is actually kind of fun, and I actually really liked that.
It's not bad. It's like, oh, okay, you thought Skullbreaker was a man because you're misogynistic. You know what I mean? And it's like, no, it's a lady. It's like, it's sometimes there are twists that aren't like mind-blowing, but do add propel the story forward in a dynamic way. And this is one of those. The problem, though, you need to realize is this is revealed in the last paragraph of the book. So before this, she hasn't been thinking about her connection to the Bloodsworn, nothing like that. And so basically what happens with her plot line is her and the kids go. There's a moment where she sees a talking raven that's trapped by spiders, and she remembers how her son helped out this moth that was trapped once, and so she's like, okay, I guess I'll help him, and she does, and then that gets her caught by people, and then almost immediately the ravens help her out, and I guess that's supposed to be the culmination of her arc, but again, there's just nothing there. Again, I'm actually even making more inference here than I'm positive is in the book.
Yeah, and also, I fully agree with you. I thought the ravens or whatever, the giant ravens, which were kind of cute. Like, I liked that we had like a talking basin, or I don't know if they're basin, but like they're talking something. Like, there's some type of mythical creature thing, and I like that we were given that the closer, because it was like. So let me just back up a little bit. So Orca anyway runs off with the boys after doing some stuff and killing some people, and they're trying to evade Guthvar, the guy with the snot, because now he is caught up, and so has Sigrun and all that. And so they're running off, and in order to lose them, they take a path that brings them to like the Boneback Mountains or Blood, whatever. Which is closer to where there are a lot of basin, and it's basically the I was gonna say the hot tub. It's the hub of all the basin and where all the gods died and stuff like that out there. And so that's how all of our characters end up meeting one another towards the end, or not meeting, but getting close to one another. And as they're running away, that's when they encounter the raven creatures. But yeah, I thought they were going to come in like maybe during the sequel or something, and that is what was going to happen, because also when the ravens come in and help her when she thinks she's going to die, it's really bothering me that I can't think of the centipede creature's name, but like the centipede creature and no, I don't think so. The centipede creature and the little tooth fairy thing, which by the way we didn't really address, but she was like, "You guys can't come. You might be killed. Bye bye."
I originally thought they were going to be her companions, and I was like, that would have been so much fun. Lady with like two weird. Again, out of all of the companions she could have, the book went with the two most boring ones.
Boring, I know. I fully agree. It was very, very like annoying. It's because I also thought that they were going to come. It felt like the setup for it. Anyway, it's because they both loved her son. Like, they both really, really loved her son.
And they were useful. They could heal her. They were... The thing about this book, too, is you keep expecting you keep expecting all of the plot lines, and we'll talk about this more, to meet up at some point for a big conclusion. And again, they don't. The only one that connect are Varg and Orca at the very last page of the book. And you also keep being like, oh, who is... So, like, I didn't expect her to be the war chief, but I did expect her to be somebody in somebody else's point of view. And I expected, honestly, a twist like, oh, one of these is happening like 20 years in the past or 20 years in the future, something like that.
I also thought maybe that was the case. Yes, I also thought that. I'm glad you thought that too.
So I kept being like, okay, this person, could it be connected to this other person? And it was like, we finally got it, but it just wasn't super interesting when it did happen.
I liked the Bloodsworn connection, but that was about it. Thank you, Miss Alice Snow. Spurt. His name is Spurt, and it's Vesley is the tooth fairy creature. So yeah, no, I really liked. Well, it didn't make sense to me that she left them behind. Honestly, like I know, like first of all, she said to them, "You cannot come with me because you will most likely die because I'm going into the lands of men, basically towns, right?" But then she's not even in towns most of the time for the first half, and also like Spurt has like a stinger that literally instantly kills people, and Vesley can hyper heal you, like with her spit, which is really cool.
Well, and also he could have come along and collected some teeth for himself.
Yeah, exactly.
Again, any of these companions would be more interesting than the two lame boys she gets. And that's basically her plot line, pretty much. I think the one thing I will note that we haven't said so far is that, like, at the beginning, I liked how distanced emotionally she was, because again, it kind of gave her a feeling, but like all of the characters in the book are like that, and especially with her, you don't rev up to feeling her desperation for her child or anything. She's always just Terminator style going into doing these things. There's no real fun interactions between her and other characters, which is just going to become kind of a problem throughout this book, is that none of the character interactions are like that fun.
No, that was one thing. Yeah, I would say I felt the Can you hear my dogs playing?
No, but they probably can on camera. Guys, dogs are cute. Just deal with it.
I'm so sorry. But no, I did feel her desperation when Thorkel died and she ran after it. But then afterwards, it's kind of like, you know how when you do watch kind of like movies like John Wick, like it's kind of a a novelty at first with how fast-paced Terminator style it is, but then it becomes tiresome because then like it's just like it's just the same thing over and over and over again, and it's just not really fun. I would have liked that her, because I'm pretty sure well, she's tainted obviously, and I would have liked if the fact that she's tainted came through more. Like we got 1/5 of it, then we got 2/5 of it, then we got 3/5 of it, as she had to use that to gather like either information or to win battles and stuff like that. I don't know. Yeah. So yeah, that's her. That's Orca.
Yeah, and so okay, and that she's like probably my favorite. Well, I don't know. Her and Varg are pretty close because I didn't.
Yeah, me too.
So Varg is like, again, he's on the run. He was a thrall. His sister is dead.
But important, he does not know how his sister died, and so in order to get the vengeance he has sworn on her name, he must find out a Sether witch or a Gotterman, something like that. Fun fact, Sether witches in the glossary is just defined as any woman that uses magic. Well, there is something that is brought up, which is the idea of the excuse my pronunciation, but the Gotterman or whatever is like man magic. It's like sorcerer. I go to a school to learn sorcerer things or whatever. And then you have the Sether witches, which is like they are born with the magic, and it's not that they have to earn it, as the one guy says, or learn it. It's that it is inherently part of them. So, which is, I guess, interesting. But yeah, no. He must seek them out in order to perform an akol, or whatever.
It's basically like a seance, where you figure out like what the last moments of the guy's life was, so then you can figure out where his sister is. And like the only place you can find it is in the Bloodsworn, who are these cool mercenaries. But the only way they'll let him use the witch is if he's one of them. So he's like, okay, fine, I'll try to join up and I'll fight Uther half troll.
Einar. Einar half troll.
Einar half troll. And like he's like, and that's where we figure out he was like a pit fighter doing pit fighting stuff. And so he's like real tough and shit. And you're like, okay, cool, he's a badass. And then he loses and then wakes up on the beach later and figures out, and like the people who are hunting him almost catch him, and they like almost kill him because he killed like their dad. After the whole stuff with his sister. But then the Bloodsworn come in and save him, and they're like, okay, you're joined up, you're an apprentice of ours. We're not going to let you use our Sether witch yet, but like, if you chill with us for a bit, we'll be, you'll get there. And so his whole story is like fitting into the Bloodsworn and learning how to use a shield. This is not the time to bring it up, but like also, I just forgot to mention it earlier. This book does a thing where it will sometimes use phrases and vocabulary from Viking culture, Norse culture, that at first you're like, oh, that's actually very cool and atmospheric, and then immediately becomes so annoying. So the amount of time, do you know what a sax is, by the way?
It's a small dagger, right?
Yes, it's a specific, but I only knew that because I know stuff about daggers. It's never really explained. Also, I kept imagining them showing up with a saxophone.
Oh my gosh. No, at first when they were saying sax, because at first they don't reference them with any description or anything, or any indication that they're blades. It just says the sacks were on their belt. And I was like, oh, like sacks of grain? I'm confused.
It would have been easier in the book because I think it's spelled Seax. But here it's pronounced sax. So he mentioned those a lot. Did you catch that people are wearing brindas and also lamellar armor? He mentions these things so much. Like instead of just saying armor, he mentions like every single time. The amount of times he repeats these words is crazy. Thought cage is the most annoying one he uses for mind.
Look,
it's the worst.
The sax and the other stuff is forgivable. It's the thought cage thing that kills me, because like, I don't mind it, but it is actually weirdly enough, it is weirdly obsessively used. Like, I don't understand why it's used as much.
Every time you would use mind or brain, which are invisible to us as readers, we just don't even really pick up on them as particular vocabulary choices, he uses thought cage in people's narration, and it's so annoying. Okay. It never becomes invisible. I liked it. Oh, deep cunning is the other one they'll use a lot.
What? I like that one. I like deep cunning.
I like deep cunning when they use it in dialogue. Again, I think when they're used in dialogue, it comes across more as like, these are Vikings talking Viking stories. But
Fair enough.
in narration, these terms become really annoying. And so it's just an annoying thing with the book. In all, a lot of this book feels like, why didn't you have somebody else read this and tell you which parts were terrible? And you should just hurry up and get to the point, or stop using these words. And he
Okay,
just
look,
didn't.
the word terrible is very harsh for this book. Maybe
Again,
grating.
yes.
Grating, maybe.
Grating, yes.
Yeah, so anyway, we have Varg. So he goes, and he it's kind of like a cute scene. I actually really liked it. It's because he goes up to, there's a line and he's like, "What's the line for?" So it's kind of funny. And I enjoyed that gimmick. But and they're like, "Yeah, so they're having interviews basically for the next Bloodsworn." And he waits because they have a Sether Witch, and then he fights Einar Half Troll, and he doesn't win, but he bites him in his leg, and that gets everyone's attention because they're like, "Wow, he's like a rabid animal." And I'm pretty sure they also knew he was tainted from the beginning because of the way he fought. I bet you they were just like, because the Bloodsworn are an entire team of tainted people.
That's spoilers for the end of the book, but yes. Also, this is again one of those plot twists where you're like, oh, that kind of makes sense, but also I'm not shocked.
Yeah.
Quilled No Ink says, I feel deep cunning could mean something more than just cunning, but Thought Cage is a straight up replacement for mine, which is a fine word to use anyway. So the thing is, Thought Cage and Deep Cunning both have a little bit of a semantic difference. Again, when they were first brought up, I was like, oh, that's nice, because it kind of speaks to a Norse way of living. Often, other cultures will have words that we don't have because those are important cultures or concepts to them. For example, like, that whole thing about like circumpolar people having 30 words for snow or whatever, like that kind of a thing. But it's just that it doesn't become invisible and it becomes annoying and grating.
And Chris made the mention, the reason they knew it's because they could smell his blood. That's right. I forgot that the blood is different and everything. So yeah, so that's how they figured it out, which would make sense why they were trying out people, because they were probably trying to seek out tainted or something like that. So he fights, he wakes up. They're like, yeah, so you're not like one of us, but you're like an apprentice to one of us. Come on, let's start training. And so thus we get a very long montage. Not montage, it's not a montage. We get a very long series of chapters that rotate, remember, between the other two. So it becomes very long of Varg training, of Varg learning to get to know these people, of Varg becoming close with this guy named Svik, who is this very Loki-esque character. And when I say Loki, I mean like red-haired Loki, not like Marvel Loki. He's kind of like, foxy. Oh, he's a fox tainted. Who knew? He's clever. He's kind of got this nice little like posh accent when he talks. Mm-hmm. He gets a posh accent. And then we have a woman who has two wolfhounds, which is kind of fun. And then we have it's Glornia, right? Yes. Glornia is the leader of the Bloodsworn, and then the Setherwish Vol, if I remember correctly, Foxy Daddy, yeah. And so they have a bunch of like little like bonding scenes, which I think did well to bond them. It did its job. It was very drawn out because of the nature of the way the book is written with the 3 different perspectives and everything. I think it would have gotten through at a fairly decent pace if it was just his story. Glornir, yeah. And so, anyway, we're just going to fast forward through all those small moments because they're not particularly necessary until we get Queen Helga's people that come to the Bloodsworn and they're like, hey, so we want to hire you to go figure out why all these kids are missing and, no, not why all these kids are missing. Why are all these people being killed up north? Please go find out why all these people are being killed up north. There's like 50, 40, 30 some odd people that have been butchered. And they're like, okay, bet. And so they go on their journey, but along their journey, they have 2 people that are part of her retinue that come with them. I don't remember their names, but one of them is the Galderman, the sorcerer dude, right? Or wizard, excuse me. Wizard's the proper term. So he's basically a wizard, right?
I thought of him as kind of like a shaman, witch doctor, but you're right.
Yeah.
Wizard is probably better.
Yeah, so he is there, and he talks smack about Vol, the Sether Witch, who is, by the way, not a thrall. She does not have a thrall collar, which is very abnormal, and that gets called out at one point by this guy. And Glornir is not very super stoked about the way he talks about Vol, his Sether witch. And later on, we find out, spoiler, it's his wife, which I liked. And so, anyway, he now, and by he, I mean Varg. God, my brain just stalled. Varg. Yes. Anyway, he. Sorry, guys, I'm dying.
Are you okay?
Yeah, it's because I'm really thirsty. I need to go get water in a second.
Go get water, and I'll keep talking. Varg, up until this point, has been like, oh, I gotta talk to the Sether Witch, and they're like, you're not one of the Bulletsworn really yet, so you can't. So he's like, okay, maybe if I talk to this other guy, he can do it for me, because he also has the power. And so he talks to the other guy, and the other guy's like, well, they're not gonna like that, so you'd be kind of betraying them, and what would it be worth me? You'd have to give me an oath. And like, so this is the moment where theoretically, this is a character conflict for Varg. Varg, up until this point, he wants vengeance, and now he has learned that he likes being around the Bloodsworn because they provide him a family that he's never had before. And so he's like, theoretically, you would think this is the big climactic choice. Which path is he going to choose, right? This doesn't really happen because what ends up happening is that they find they're tracking down, right, whoever took these kids or whatever, and they've basically track it down to like some kind of a demon pit place, where there's like a bunch of the demon-y creatures. And there's a big fight, and he saves the life of the chief. And then after the fight, he's talking with the Sether Witch and telling her his story. And the Sether Witch is like, okay, maybe we can do it now. And then the witch doctor guy comes in and is like, haha, I'm evil. And he steals the Sether Witch and kills one of his bros. And he's like, okay, come join me. And Varg is like, no. And again, this is not a big moment. This is not a climactic choice that Varg is making to give up, to go one path or the other. It's just kind of like, well, you just betrayed and killed one of my friends. Like, no, I'm not going to go with you. And that's, again, part of the problem with this book is that, like, there's no real arc. There's no real themes to any of the characters doing anything.
And it's the same. Yeah, Miss Sally Snow makes a good point. There's another big point when we get to Elvar's story where she has to make a big decision of whether or not she wants to believe in her father's offer, a father who has always tried to control her and she's run away from.
I think with Varg, yeah, there's no big choice of like, what am I going to do? What am I not? After this point, they then just go back home and go back and find Orca, and that's when the two match up. Like, you just don't need his plot line at all. Like, you really don't need almost any of it after, again, the status quo is set. And that's just one of the big problems. You don't get anything thematically from it. You don't get anything plot-wise.
Yeah,
Nothing
and
really
that's
happens.
where Hope to Dust and Miss Sally Snow make the point that I was going to make, which is basically like when I was talking about Elvar, is that you get these like plot points where it seems like there's going to be, character growth, and it just kind of that nothing really happens in particular. But where did you leave off on Varg?
I skipped through the entire last part of his storyline up until he meets Orca.
Oh, okay,
So
yeah.
I just went over it very quickly because I just don't think it's that important. Like, there's some world building stuff. They find some Dragonborn who are like enslaving some people, but like,
Well,
you also kind of know
we
that
get
from other
this.
people's.
We get this final fight scene before like basically the end of the novel where he sees Orca, and that's when there are these trolls with big balls, and there are a whole bunch of humans in thrall collars and stuff like that. And it's obvious that the Vaesen have been enslaving people in order to unearth something. It's because they've been mining basically and taking out rocks. And so they have this big battle scene there, and this guy comes out and he's got like red eyes and he's got this giant cool bone like
Sword.
orc sword basically, and he fights, and this is where it's like revealed finally that, oh, would you look at that, Varg's a Ulfotnir thing, a wolf, tainted. And I don't really understand why Varg. So wait, I actually want to say something. I don't understand why Varg has the reaction he does. It's because the thing is yeah, the tainted are looked down upon in this world and they're considered less than, but Varg never once or if he does, it's very minor, ever like expresses any similar feelings or even any type of viewpoint on the tainted. And so when he
Yeah.
learns that he is tainted, he has this really visceral reaction where he runs away, he vomits, he's like, oh no, how could I be tainted, and stuff like that. And it's like, first of all, how can you know something's weird with you? You literally have said this to yourself several times. And also, why are you having this horribly negative visceral reaction? You have not once explained to us, the readers, that you would have hated for this to happen, or that you have some type of viewpoint that would have made this make sense.
It's weird because the book is very atmospheric and it does kind of draw you into a sense of culture. But this specifically, like, you keep hearing about how being tainted is terrible, but it doesn't actually really feel that way. Like, it kind of, again, you're correct, you're totally right, his reaction is so outsized to how much, he in his thought has never been like, ugh, tainted, I'm a thrall, but at least I'm not one of them.
Yes,
or like,
yes.
even like, they did cause all the problems with the world. And so it's like, and so when he and again, that's not even a big conflict. He figures out about it, is kind of upset, and then by the next chapter, he's now okay with it and is like, well, at least they're kind of like family. That could have been an interesting arc to discover, If it had been revealed, it should have been revealed right at the beginning once he joined the Bloodsworn. Like, that would have actually been cool if they had been like, well, no, you're one of us now, so we're going to kill you if you leave. And then his decision at the end would have been like, no, I can leave without dying, but I have decided not to.
And not just that, but why? So the whole time that he's with the Bloodsworn, they're kind of like, I mean, don't get me wrong, it's not of the kindness of their hearts, but they're not unkind to him. They're very supportive. They're teaching him things. They're taking him in as like kind of one of their own. And so why would he ever really want to betray that? And so to create an even bigger tension, to have that when he first falls to Einar and then he wakes up and he's like, oh, where am I? And they're like, oh, so bro, you're tainted. And they're like, and yeah, that would make so much more sense, because then later on when the Galderman is like, hey, so like, join us. I just killed this other guy who's tainted. Come with us. All these tainted people are gross. Come with us, or whatever, or something. I don't know.
Yeah, he could have just seen it as like, okay, I'm going to join them long enough to do the Sether Witch thing, and then I'm leaving because they're gross tainted. And then he realizes like, no, I have overcome that. It's actually interesting because it would have been a really good source of tension and character growth if it had just been revealed earlier. And the other thing is that the figuring out the Bloodsworn like this is you're like just kind of like, okay, cool, but also how does that make sense that nobody's found out yet? And then they're like, actually there's a lot of warbands that are like that, and like that would have been interesting if like tainted tended to form into warbands, and that's one of the reasons people didn't like them and felt like they needed to be collared or something like that. We had a couple of good comment. So Chris said, it's like it was a long book that cut a third of the way through and it doesn't have a complete structure of its own.
Yes.
Yeah. There are certain books that have that problem where it just feels like we don't get to the thing we were building up for the whole time. And so like, it's like an arch. Like if the last third of the arch is missing, the whole thing fails. And that's kind of what it feels like. Miss Ali Snow says, it's 50% setup, 47% side quest, 2% payoff, and 1% troll balls. Yep, and that last one could have been a little higher.
Yeah, that's how I felt too. No, but I feel it's very I have mixed feelings. It's because I don't think that's inherently bad, and I feel bad. It's because like long stories are not bad. That's not a bad thing. I'm okay with that. But when you have to cut it up into different books,
when it becomes a structural problem that it's so long.
Yeah.
So for example, one of my big problems with this is a Feast for Crows, not a Dance with Dragons. One of the problems with the Dance with Dragons is that he literally ran out of page space to finish the story. And so the two big battles that the book has been building to are just going to be shoved into the next one. I believe House of the Dragon has also had a similar problem, though I haven't watched the second season so far. And so, yeah, the problem is when the length becomes a structural issue, that really becomes a problem. Also, Ben has a point that... also, why do we have to do the having superpowers is a bad thing again? So I would have liked... So this is one of my main problems with stories, is always when they're like, Because in a real society, if you had inherent powers, you would become the powerful person. You would then get everyone to understand that being powerful is good. Like you just would. It never makes sense that you would be low in the societal rung. You would always rise to be the highest in the societal rung, especially in pre-industrial societies where violence is the main form. Like they have a military aristocracy. The one thing I wish in this book is that it had been specified that A, they're not that much stronger, and B, it comes with the major downside of being able to be controlled in the way that a normal person wouldn't.
Yeah.
So if it had been emphasized, we have thralls and they're okay, but these tainted we can actually fully control. Because it's kind of in there in that you get all these like bodyguard tainted, but you don't, again, that's never really explicitly stated, so you kind of have to read that into the book, and it's not really there even. Like, I don't know that that's accurate. And not phrasing it that way, I think, is a bit of a problem.
I fully agree. That's actually a really, really good point about the whole thrall collar thing. That's something that I also got a little confused about, right? Which, granted, again, I'm not reading the book, I'm listening to it. But it's just, the idea that the thrall collars only really, because the thing is Varg has, oh, okay, that makes more sense then. I don't know. Yeah, I wish that was clarified a little bit more.
Yeah, I wish it had been a societal point. Like at one point we had thralls that weren't tainted, but like, they're humans. We can only control them through social means, not magical. But that's a downside to being a super powerful being, is that you can be controlled.
Are there, wait, so Varg was tainted, which makes sense why he was a thrall, I guess. But like, so then are all thralls tainted? Nope. Really?
Independent. No. It's just independent of it. But again, it's like, it kind of should have been, yeah.
Yeah, no, that would make more sense with your whole point of like how powers aren't actually a benefit in this case.
Yeah, like, and because then that would have, and also there should have just been more variation. Like we get a mention of some Russia-y place at some point, and it would have been interesting if it had been like, oh, that the tainted rule there because there's like less of them, or there's
I got more
access.
Like Turkey. I don't know why I thought Turkey, but it reminded me of Turkey.
It gave me slight Mongol Kiev Rus kind of feelings.
Yep, you're right.
Because it's also called Grafka. And I was like, Shadow and Bone, Shadow Daddy, the cut. But I think that would have been a better way of doing it. Okay, and so then we have Elvar's storyline, which we're just going to go through pretty quickly. She hunts people down. She's a slaver, essentially. They find this bear guy after fighting a troll with huge balls.
A berserker.
In the face.
A berserker. By the way, you guys were discussing how big the balls are. I was picturing wrecking ball size, basically. Which is really funny to me. Well, they're said to be huge. So, like, and it said they were twice as tall as a man and 4 times wide. So, maybe not wrecking
the balls.
The troll. The troll, not the balls exclusively.
Okay, no, I think we're talking more like bowling balls.
No, I think a little bit bigger than bowling balls.
Here's the thing with balls that's kind of confusing.
Yoga balls.
Here's the thing about balls, and you may not know this because you're a virginal flower, but there's the size of the actual ball, but then the ball itself can seem, sorry, Mom, can seem larger because of the container it's in, if you know what I mean. Like, and so the actual size of it is a little hard to judge.
Also, if it's cold out, they could shrink up a little bit. So maybe they're actually smaller than their true size. Maybe they're actually quite larger during the summer.
Yeah, and like maybe they just swing a lot. You know what I mean? Like different animals have balls in different ways. So we'll just, we'll leave it there.
But we never get told the penis size. I'm curious as to how large the penis was.
Yeah, it's interesting. We don't. You would assume that it would be, because they're human-like, that it would be...
like, is it going to be like... It's it's certainly not circumcised. So, like, do they get, like, raging boners during battle because of all the endorphins? Like, I want to know these things. I want to know the biology of these trolls.
The book goes out of its way to mention the balls, so it's weird that it doesn't go further. Like, this isn't us just speculating randomly.
No.
Elvar, she does this. She brings... they capture this family who's, like, pretty nice, but they enslave them and bring them back to... a place that's inside of the skull of a snake dragon. Snakavik. The place where people snack. And at this point, you're like, oh, okay. Are we gonna have are we the baddies moment from her at some point where she realizes, like, hey, we're not great people, and maybe in book 2 we'll get that eventually.
Yeah.
And so when they go back to the big place, though, they find out that shock, she was a princess and she ran away because she wanted to, get battle fame and stuff like that. Do we think trolls are showers or growers?
I like maybe they tuck during fights.
That's actually a good point. Maybe just they have like a special belt. And her father is like, I'm very cunning. I wanted to marry you to this person, Helka's son. And you're like, oh, that's cool. We're actually getting kind of some trade-off back and forth between storylines in terms of what's going on. And she's like, no, I don't want to. And he's like, okay, well, now I'll give you a war band if you come back.
Hold on a
to
second.
us.
Can I just want to explain some things. I want you guys to, well, I want people to understand her story. Like I was saying earlier at the very beginning of the this discussion, was that her world is very different too, which makes it interesting, but also like falls flat, you know, because of her. What I was saying before, because when she's like, I've gone out on my own, and she has basically a surrogate father called Gren, and he's made some type of vow to her dead mother to protect her or something to that effect, and so he's been with her. It's like you know, her princess bodyguard thing. And so anyway, when they get the Berserkir guy and enslave him and bring the wife as well as the son of that guy back, they go up to the Jarl, her father, as we get revealed. But what's cool about his mead hall is that, first of all, it's very grand. It's like gigantic. It's very intensely large. The city is weird because it's in the skull. So there's a lot of like smells of human and like just human life and like feces, and there's whores, and there's like, you know, it feels very, very not metropolitan, urban in comparison to all the other things that we've been given. So it's kind of fun and interesting. And when you get up to the mead hall where they're meeting with her father to sell the Berserkir guy, there's a giant head of a giant that had been killed and swallowed by Snaka, and was basically exhumed, and it is still alive, just the head. And the head like loves Elvar. Like it's like this really cute relationship where she as a child would feed him mead and he'd be like, I are my favorite kid. And the head like can tell you know, riddles and stuff to give you insight into the proper course of action and such. You know, an advisor basically. And what is this? Anyway, and so, sorry guys, I found a lump on my dog, and I'm like, okay, great. So now that I'm distracted, anyway,
Yeah,
and so
I really liked the giant head. I thought he was fun. I thought that was like a good, like weird character,
yeah,
like world building thing that like the giants were around, but then he just had to stay under a river, and now he's here, and he's just weird, and I liked that. And I liked
loved
too.
that.
It was the one moment I found her interesting was when she was kind of like talking with him, because I was like, oh, that's cute. It's like small girl, big giant head.
Yeah, I really like that. And it's kind of like so the one part that I actually really liked Elvar is during the city scene. And I almost kind of wish she went with her father instead of going with the group. It's because I felt like that would have been far more interesting, because then that would have led into her father betraying her. It's almost like she jumped ahead of her own arc and like found the solution to the problem that you, the reader, would be like, yeah, why would you go back with your dad? Your dad is only ever betrayed you. And it's like she find that, like, I mean, that's great that she's smart enough to figure that out, but it does take away from the tension and the later conflict that would have been very interesting to explore. Because then it's like, why even bring it up then? Why even have the father come back into the storyline and everything? Because she also has a shitty old she has a shitty brother that's like an asshole, but then she has a nice brother that misses
This
her.
is all set up for book 2, where she goes back and gets control of the warband, gets like a war. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like
that's fair.
this is all that really is.
Yeah, and there's also like a Sether witch that like also it serves her father, and so it feels very fun and complex and multifaceted. And she's like, nah, bitches, I'm going back out with the battle grim on the wave, Jarl, or whatever, and we're gonna go to someplace else, because what happens is the child of the Sether Witch lady, the wife of the Berserkir who has been sold, has been kidnapped by an evil other warband lady called something Ravenfeeder, and the the mom, it starts with a U. I'm dying that I can't think of.
Yeah, I don't remember either. But basically, yeah, they go on a quest. They have to sign an oath to find the. They're gonna find. Oh, basically, they're gonna find the dead Yggdrasil, which is like the world tree. They call it something else, but that's basically what it was.
Oopsa.
Is Ilskra. Ilskra.
Ilskra. Ilskra.
I liked her name. And then basically again, stuff happens on the way there, but none of it actually goes anywhere. She doesn't have an arc. She starts sleeping with this one guy after he saves Gren's life. I don't know. I shipped her and
That's her
Gren more than I
bodyguard,
shipped
if you
her
forgot.
and this other guy. And this other guy she was sleeping with, it's eventually revealed at the very end. He betrays her captain to the crow eaters or whatever they're called, who are all tainted, they find out. And she's like, why did you do this? And he's like, dude, you worked for a slaver who was a bad guy who enslaved these people who himself, and like he frees the guy, the tainted that were under the bloodsworn, or not the bloodsworn, the grim whatever's control. And then there's a big battle, and at the end and what it ends up is that this whole time, what the crow eaters and all the other people had been steering children for was so that they could sacrifice them to have Likvra,
Liklifra or something like that.
ancient dragon lady, come out from under the earth where she had been trapped. And she comes out and she's like evil, and she's fighting some Valkyries, and she wins. And she's like, the world is different. I'm going to go to my mead hall. And that's where the book ends for Elvar. And that's it.
Does that mean, so I had to rush in the last 30 minutes of it to finish it, but so does that mean, that doesn't mean Brekka's dead though, right?
Who?
Brekka, the son, Orca's son.
I don't think so.
Because
I'm going to be
they had
honest.
to, yeah.
I have trouble with the names.
No, I don't think so anyway. But so yeah, no, that's the story, and it's good, I think. I think it's worth a read for those who are looking for something atmospheric and Viking especially. And I think there are more good things than bad, but it's just a shame because it doesn't have like the sharp edge of a really engaging story, you know?
The thing about it is that I wish more, again, okay, so I found this pleasant to listen to, but it was really just at the end where nothing happened. Like, literally, I was surprised when the book ended. I thought we were still going to get some more stuff to happen. Like, we were going to get a conclusion, and we don't. And I was just like, what the fuck? But again, I found it pleasant to listen to, but it is a 17-hour prologue. I do wish more had been done with the setting. I think post-Ragnarok Vikings actually could have been cooler if it was a little more post-apocalyptic and a little bit more like the world ended and now this is what's left. And it's done like a little bit, but not a ton. I understand his decision, but I would have liked to go a little more balls to the wall with it. I think the big thing is, and this goes back to what I was talking about at the beginning, which is that it makes me remember why I theoretically like YA more. And that's because it tends to have more focused on one character and their relationships, which is one of the things I really like from fiction. And I don't feel like this book has that, for example. Like, none of the character interactions are actually that interesting. None of the characters do you feel especially close to. They don't really have compelling character narratives of their own. And so, like, I don't think all epic fantasy is like this or whatever, but like that, I'm like, oh yeah, that is one of the reasons I theoretically think I like YA, even though I don't.
Other way around, you mean? You theoretically think you like YA?
Theoretically, I think I like it. That's one of the reasons I keep picking it, but
okay,
keep
I
being
get it.
disappointed, is because it does tend to have, and that's kind of one of the theories I heard. I think the book Leo talked about this, about romantasy, is that essentially romantasy is what New Adult was trying to be for a while, which is that there were like a lot of readers who were turned off by epic fantasies, big scope, and they wanted the more personal YA stuff, but they're adults, so they were like, let's make it New Adult, and then that didn't work, so instead we get romantasy, which is awful, and an outgrowth of the romance genre.
You know what?
And so
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
no, that's about it. Like, that's kind of my feelings on the book. I think it's fine if you're okay with a 17-hour prologue.
If you're looking to relive, if you have watched the show Vikings and you're like, wow, I really wish I could relive the vibe of that, but I don't feel like rewatching all these seasons, read this. It'll provide the same satisfaction, I think, to some degree. But no, I just feel like it's been so long since I've read something that like gripped me, where I couldn't put it. I know there was one that we have read at least within the past 6 months. I feel like I could be wrong, but I feel like there was one not so crazy long ago that I felt that way towards. But I haven't felt that way towards a long time. The first thing that comes to mind when I think about that, but I know I'm probably ignoring some other ones, is the Southern Reach trilogy. It was just like so gripping for me, and I don't know, I just really miss, like, I miss wanting to stay up late to listen to something or to read something. I miss that
Nope,
feeling.
I'm totally with you. I'm totally with you on this. I miss it too. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, like I just don't we don't get a lot of them. There have been some, but like no, not really like that. And this isn't that book. This is a pleasant book. Even at its best, it's not a gripping book. Even if you
Yeah.
like this book, you're not like, oh wow, I really need to figure out what happened next to these characters. Zira says, there is a good book in here that an aggressive editor could have helped with. This book scrapes by on vibes. Yeah, I mean, a lot of it could have just been scraped out. And I think also doing more with the characters we were talking about. If Orca had more interesting sidekicks, if Varg had like figured out about the whole Bloodsworn thing earlier, the Tainted thing, and that would have been interesting if Elva just hadn't existed. Like,
Yeah, honestly. Yeah, no, that's also I know that if I had written a book at this point in my life, it probably would have ended up like that. Or that's very high in me to say. But if I were successful at my most successful, I think it would have been similar to the success level of this. I think I too would have been missing things, that would have made readers be like, oh, come on, I like the words, they're pretty, I like the things, they're cool, but it's missing the gripping part of it. So I don't. It's hard. It's hard to have the whole package.
No. I disagree with that. I think writers just need to get better. I don't think it's that hard. I think, from what I understand, this is kind of a problem with his other books too. So there's some that the extent to which this is just kind of like his
Thing.
his problems that he has. But yeah, thank you all for joining us. Thank you in the Discord for reading this. I haven't announced the next book, but it's going to be The Blade itself for next month.
Wait, what is that about?
It's another like very man fantasy book, but it's quite good.
Men.
It's a man book for mans.
This did
it's,
not
it's
come across as a man book for mans.
Well, okay, so the thing about it is that because there's a lot of women in it, but I just mean in terms of like the genre. I'm
Fair
joking
enough.
somewhat when I say that. When I'm joking in the same way that I say they're girl books for girls. You know what I mean? Like
Yes, I do.
that's not
I get what you're saying.
necessarily- So yeah, thank you all for joining us. If you have any comments, leave those below. Please like the video; that really does help. And yeah, think about joining our Patreon. There's a lot of cool, sexy people on the Discord.
Yes, there is. And if there are any of you thinking to yourself, wow, they don't like anything, that is incorrect. This is actually, first of all, we did like this. So there you have it.
Yeah, actually.
But also, we have a whole playlist full of books that we do like, and a whole playlist full of books that we don't like, and a whole full playlist of critiques on writing, and so many other things. So it's not just about book reviews, it's just about the craft of writing as well, and storytelling. So there's many aspects to our podcast, so please feel free to join and engage in a higher level of thinking.
And with that, we will all leave you all. We love you, our parasocial darlings.
Bye.